My name is Jacob, and I am a Norse Pagan, and today we're going to talk about rituals, and how to make them and how to perform them. Now, a little bit of a precursor before we dive deep into this is the fact that I'm calling it a ritual, when many groups in the Asatru and heathen community refer to them as bloats, when we really have to look into what is a bloat. The word itself just means blood, or in the context of an offering, a blood offering. And so many groups do not see it as this way. They just see it as a sacrifice or an offering to the gods, and that's fine. But it does seem like the term itself means blood offering. And so many groups also don't use the term unless they're doing a blood offering, which most groups don't do blood offerings anymore. Most give, I believe it's called a votive offering, in the sense that it's like gifts of, handmade goods, food, bread, liquids, and things like that. And so there's a lot around bloat, but ultimately it comes up to you what term you use and what your kindred and group uses. I put out a poll on Instagram just to see what the community used or see what they preferred. So remember, this is just from my Instagram community of 10,000 people, but only about 1,000 people saw these. And the first one being, what do you call your offerings to the gods? Do you refer to them as bloats or rituals? And 34% of people said they use bloat, and 66% of people use ritual. And that's out of 350 votes. And then the next question I asked was, does it actually matter what we call our offerings to the gods? Only 7% of people said yes, and 93% of people said no, and this was out of 490 votes. From this poll alone, it seems like the majority of people do not care what we call the act of giving offerings to the gods, that the term itself isn't as important. Now, for some it may venerate the past, and that's wonderful, and I'm glad they have that. But for me, it's all about the action, not necessarily what I call it. Because we have to ask ourselves, why do we give offerings to the gods? Well, one, usually to pay respect, but also because we usually want something in return, or we want guidance. And so it's that two-way road of we're giving offering to the god and we want something in return. And the reason we do that is because it works. I believe you need to focus on what works for you within your own practice, within your kindred's practice, and the larger rituals that you do. For the most part, I would assume the majority of people watching this video are thinking about things like this, thinking about personal practice. We'll move into the larger rituals, but that's actually one of the hardest parts about starting this path, is that most of the information you find on bloats or rituals is the fact that they are made for larger events and larger groups of people. Now, you can downscale those things and make them for your own personal practice, which is why I also took to Instagram to ask people, what is their personal practice? What do they do when they actually communicate with the gods? And I received a wide variety of answers. Many talking about how it's just about meditation, calling forth the gods, clearing your head, having a conversation with them, and giving an offering with intention. Some people gave offerings of incense and candles. Some people just lit incense and candles when they actually spoke to the gods. Many people drew circles or made circles outside in nature. Other people just had a very simple offering practice of leaving apples in the woods and things like that. It is so many different things that a ritual can be. It can be so simple. And that's what I want to focus on today, is the simplicity of it. And then we'll move into the bigger scale of things. So at its core, what is a ritual? To me, it all comes down to this thing I almost refer to as like the ritual sandwich. So for a traditional sandwich, you gotta have your bread. You got, on both sides to contain everything. And for me, that is the opening of the ritual and the closing of a ritual. You gotta have those two things. That's what you should start with when creating your own ritual or thinking about how you're going to communicate with the gods. So you need to first summon them and set your intention. So why are you here? You wish to conversate, you wish to seek guidance. I'm summoning Odin for guidance. I'm summoning Freya for guidance and love. I'm summoning my ancestors to learn about my past. That's your first part of the bread. And then the closing half, to me, reflects the first half. So you have to then thank the god or goddess or the presence that you summoned, close with the intention, thank you for your guidance. I will seek it out. I will follow it. Pay honor and homage to the being you summoned and for the time. And those two things should be very similar, and that's going to hold the ritual itself for you. This is a very silly way to describe it, but it's actually something that helps me build my ritual, is I start with the opening and the closing. And then the size of that is going to vary based on the complexity of your ritual. For a very starting ritual, I would say summon the gods or god or goddess that you want to talk to, or the presence, and then just have a very simple thing in the middle. Hey, I've brought for you a drink. I'm seeking guidance, or I just want to pay respect. Odin, O powerful God, O master of wisdom and runes, please listen to me. Here's this offering of whiskey to pay my respects. Boom, that's your meat. That's your goodness in the middle. And then you close it out. And that's as simple as a ritual can be. And then this can transition to something as simple as an offering to Freyr. You're out in the woods, you have an apple, you want to give it to him, you call forth Freyr, you ask for his guidance. Freyr, bountiful harvest god, god of the fields, god of masculinity, please, come to me in this time. I seek your guidance. I have gifts for you, and I have brought this apple for you for this reason. I want to learn this from you, and this apple with the intent that is yours. And give that apple to him and thank the god after you've spent your time with him, and send him away with respect and honor. And so it can be very simple. And then as you keep building that sandwich up, as you keep adding to those rituals, it's going to get more complex. But you have to have that beginning and that end, that foundation for what you're doing. So what I want to look at now is, with that knowledge in mind, with that idea, let's look at a ritual in one of these books that I have. And so you can kind of see those basic elements. Now it's going to get more complex. They're going to add more layers, but that basic idea is there. So this comes from Beyond the North Wind, a really amazing book I just finished. So it kind of researches the history of Asatru, Heathenry, and Norse Paganism, as long as it introduces some awesome ideas. But it does have a really great section. It doesn't directly say this is Icelandic Asatru, but I believe it is. And it's very hard to find information, I find, at least in the English source, of their actual rituals, of their actual bloats rituals. So this comes from their page 139, discussing Asatru rituals. Celebrants enter the ritual space, form a circle around a ring of stones within which a log fire waits to be lit. One of the group acts as a gothi, or priest. Others are assigned various roles in the ritual. The gothi, or one of the other participants, circles the ritual space, raising a hammer of Thor at each of the 4 compass points, and in the center calling upon the spirits of each one to hallow the circle and keep watch. There follows a speech greeting the gods and goddesses, nature spirits, and ancestors, inviting their presence at the ritual. One member of the group is assigned to light a fire and does so while reciting some words honoring the fire element. A song or two may be sung as the fire comes to life, and then the words may be spoken on the subject of the seasonal festival being celebrated. The appropriate deity or deities may be invoked. More songs may follow, then come the moment when personal offerings are made in the form of fruits and flowers and other objects, which the celebrants have brought with them. Each places his or her offering in the fire while saying, if they wish, to whom or what purpose they're making the offering to. A loaf of bread, sometimes in the form of a horse as a symbolic sacrifice, is passed around. Each person eats a portion of it and throws a piece into the fire and further offering. A meat horn circles 3 times, and each person speaks a toast or says some thoughtful words. The first round is for the gods and goddesses, the second for the ancestors, and the third for anyone else who wishes to speak. The gathering ends with some words of thanks to the gods and goddesses, spirits and ancestors for their presence at the right, followed by a formal closing of the circle. So this, again, comes from Beyond the North Wind. This actually came out in 2020, so very recent work. That is very complicated, and I actually broke that down. And it seems like there are 8 steps to this ritual. You have the hallowing of the space, in the sense that you declare the space sacred, you cleanse the negative presences out of it, and you summon the gods and goddesses. It seems like they have a focus on reading poetry, as well as like singing songs for the gods. They do call attention to the offerings in which they're giving, but they do also like summon the gods in a way of like, summoning from the north, the south, the east, and the west, which I've seen before in recurring. They also declare the purpose of the ritual, which is, it mentions like the spring festival or the seasonal festival. They draw attention to the offerings, and then they do share the drinks in the 3 circles, which I believe is called a sumbel or a sambal. Which is also its own separate ritual in its own way, but also has made its way into this as well. They, of course, give their offerings and close the ritual. And so that is 8 different things all packed into one. So that is a pretty beefy sandwich. So I don't think that's something that necessarily you need to do for your first few rituals, or if you're looking to do a simple one to Odin. Obviously, you don't need to summon all the gods, goddesses, ancestor spirits. Like, that is a very big and powerful ritual that is meant for a large group. So focus on one deity or a couple deities, but just maintain that respect and maintain that foundation. So when I first started my journey, I learned of rituals like that. I've learned of these very formalized rituals, which to me personally are too dogmatic and have too much filler. Like, there's too much there. Like, I'm not going to sing to the gods. I might read poetry. I've definitely added poetry, but I'm not going to sing. I don't really believe in the hallowing of a space with a hammer. Like, I know many groups do. It's just not for me. I don't really feel the You know, I've read some where they actually have like the hammer sign, almost like the cross sign. I'm like, whoa, that is way too Christian. I don't think that's actually a thing. So one of the biggest influences for me, which honestly was one of the most inspiring things for my own personal ritual practice, was Heilung. I know this is a band many of us enjoy, and honestly, seeing them live truly made me realize what ritual was about. And maybe this is the same for people that go to these more formal Asatru rituals, but man, the magic that Heilung creates, like obviously it's a concert, but it is a ritual. And they even refer to their own music and their own live concert as rituals. And they had an opening ceremony and a closing ceremony that kept everything together. And of course, their level of knowledge and experience is out of this world as far as their personal practices, diving into things like shamanism, poetry ringing, obviously singing, runic work, and all these things. It's amazing. But the magic they created in that time in between, I mean, their sandwich is big. And so, you know, it's just amazing how much they were able to fit in there. And obviously that is a much higher level of practice. And the more you learn, the more you practice, the bigger and more complex rituals you can do. And so Heilung definitely showed me that there are different ways you can do it. And it is scary out there because you don't want to be wrong and disrespect the gods, the deities, or the community. But at the same time, I think it is okay to explore and make some mistakes. You know, and just learn and don't be afraid to try new things and see if they work. Ultimately, it doesn't work. And so when contacting Odin, you know, I learned that reading poetry and calling him by his different names is a great way to connect with him. And you're going to learn that every deity has different ritual things that you start doing, which you then eventually, if you start doing larger rituals and, you know, having others participate in them, you can bring to those as well. So with that in mind, you know, with this background knowledge of more traditional looking rituals, the idea of what a ritual is, and then my personal inspiration with Heilung, I do want to share with you, at least right here, a video from Midsummer last year. I feel like this was a really easy ritual to talk about, and it's one I actually haven't shown before, really. Like the Midsummer video did not show this ritual a lot. So I wanted to share with you the process behind this, the idea behind it, so you can see the thoughts behind my own personal group ritual practice. And then after that, I'll show you my personal individual practice as well a little bit. So watching this here, the way we started the ritual is, first off, it was Casey and I, who's been in the video before, both were the ritual leaders in this context. And so I represented the gods and she represented the goddesses, was our original idea. And so before everyone got around the fire, her and I walked around the fire, getting into a form of trance, and essentially like opening the space up, opening the fire, opening the ritual. So we did have a drum that we beat for quite a while. And then as soon as we were done, we kind of stopped. She went off to get everyone to come around the fire, and I continued hallowing the space. And then once everyone got there, I did an opening speech for the gods, the goddesses, and everything like that. You know, I didn't go around and like, you know, anoint all the directions and things like that, but I at least welcomed the gods, the land spirits, and the ancestors to join us around the fire. And once the ritual actually began, I made the fire the focal point of everything. That was where the offerings were going. Those were the messages to the gods. That was the intention, is that where the gifts were going into the fire, they were going up to the gods, and we were all, you know, paying attention to that fire. And it was crazy because it was raining. We kept the fire going. It was a really cool ritual. And my whole thing for myself was that I was not going to leave the contact of the fire. My eyes were going to stay on it the whole time. I was really there to show the emotion of the fire, to really attach myself to it. And then Casey was not meant to speak. Well, actually, she even learned, she was like, I learned that I didn't need to speak the whole ritual. Things come to you while you do these rituals. And so she went around to each individual person, and I was the voice. So she would look at them in the eye, and I would say, what have you brought for the gods? Who are you giving to? Why are you giving? And then it would give that person in that circle time to actually speak to the gods and say, I'm giving to Odin, I'm giving to Freya, I'm giving her this is why, and then they would put it in the fire. And then we went around the whole circle. And when we finally got back to me, I went around, I actually moved from the fire. So I had finally, for the first time in that entire ritual, and up to that entire point, I had not left my eyes from that fire. I then finally averted my gaze. And the first thing I did was went to each individual person and looked every single person in the eye. And the way that they could see the fire from my eyes, see that fire and the power of the gods and the gifts we had just given them. And I looked at every single one of them. I believe I did 2 passes around. And at the very end, you know, I wanted to end it in a very, like, Midsummer seemed to be more of a dancing thing, dancing around the fire. I'm not a dancer myself or any kind of thing like that. But at the very end, I just felt that energy to tell everyone we need to dance around the fire. And of course, almost everyone did it. People grabbed instruments, started playing the instruments. We all spun around the fire. It was awesome. But that's just that energy, the energy that created. And that was kind of the closing of the ritual. Like, I opened the ritual with Casey, and then everyone else closed it together. It was crazy, amazing stuff. And then we actually did do things where we jumped over the fire too. It was a lot of fun. Someone slipped and fell. It was great. So, that was obviously something that, was, specific to my group, but at the same time, it still fit that sandwich, fit that idea of we had an opening part, we had a way to howl the space, we had a way to close the space, and then everything in between that created the magic. And I didn't get anything from any book I had ever read that I put my eyes to the fire and that my eyes absorbed the magic of the fire. But at the same time, in the ritual, that's what it became. And at the end of the day, did it work? Did it do anything? And everyone dancing around that fire, the magic created the feeling everyone had. Yes, it did something. And that is ultimately what matters in these rituals. Does it invoke the gods? Does it respect them, honor them? And does it create something? So looking at an altar space, what about personal practice? What have I done with my altar space myself? One thing I do recommend doing is getting a really nice leather-bound books. I mean, what pagan doesn't like leather-bound books? So this is mine. So I keep all my personal rituals in here. So anything I developed that works. When you find something that works, record it down. That way, one, you have it for yourself. You can teach it to others. And there's something to actually record it. So highly recommend having this for ritual practice. I know runes are a very popular thing to bring into rituals. Start doing that. Add more complexity, add more flavor to that ritual sandwich as you begin your practice, but start simple, but record it when things work. So that's what I keep here on my altar. And so for me, for my personal ritual practice, I do have my offering mug here that I do pour everything into, and I've recently changed around everything. I actually plan on doing an altar video separately here soon, everything that has changed lately. So for my personal practice, I sit in front of the altar. I usually invoke the god or goddess that I'm working with. And same thing, I kind of let the space purify itself. I have used incense and different herbs to do that, depending on the occasion. But a very simple one for me is just calling the gods, setting the intention of the space. This space is already sacred. I've made the space very sacred. Everything on here is very important to me. So the blessing and cleansing isn't as important to me now, but having a space like that, like this, is important. And so set the intention for it, why I'm having the conversation, and then usually I talk to the god, explain why I'm talking to them, meditate for a while, take my time with it, and then I will pour the offering in the mug. Typically I use liquid offerings for my inside altar. I use food if I go out into nature. And then I thank the god for their time, and usually I spend more time reflecting. If I am feeling like I need answers or want to see what the future lies, I do use runes to divinate at the same time. And so that's a very simple thing that you can do, is, again, just keep it simple, especially I think in the home ritual. Now, the more I have explored myself, and this is something I'm not sure how deep I'll go into the future, but I've been bringing drum work, which I have my drum up here as well. I've been bringing drum work into my own personal work, more poetry reading, more chanting. So again, I'm adding more layers to that ritual, but again, keep it simple. So in closing this video, this is a very hard subject to talk about, and I hope it has been helpful to you because, once again, I was not too long ago trying to find this information for the first time and trying to find what I should do for my personal ritual practice. Should I follow the more traditional Asatru routes? Should I, look at things like Heilung and go crazy with it and put on crazy hats like this? So there's a lot of different ways you can go, but I really do, I found the foundation of those two layers of the beginning and the end, the summoning and the ending, those two pieces of bread, and then keeping it simple and adding complexity into that ritual practice as I've become more experienced and have met others and learned of their ritual practice. And I think asking others, there are so many members of this community now, asking others what their personal practices are so important to enriching your own. Always seek to learn more. And then when something good comes across your door, write it down. And then perhaps you can share it with others as well, because that's what we need in this community. We need to stop saying that people are wrong and stop just correcting them and just share what we do and enrich each other's lives and share wisdom so that we all can improve our own personal ritual practice. But folk, until the hall, skål.